Welcome to the Economic Ideas Forum, edition 2015. Thank you all for making it here today. Without further ado, let's start with our opening remarks by our president, Mikuláš Dzurinda.
It is quite difficult to decide what direction is the right one. I will look to the boss. Yeah, I'm a runner, so this is my privilege to use these circumstances. So, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, as the president of the Wilfried Martens Center for European Studies, the official think tank and political foundation of the European People's Party, I am really honored and pleased to welcome you all to the 6th Economic Ideas Forum. After a journey that brought this conference to Madrid, then to London, Dublin, Helsinki, and Bratislava, we are pleased that the 6th Economic Ideas Forum is finally coming to Brussels, to the heart of the EU institutions. Sadly, we convene in a city brutally traumatized during the long week of heavy psychological strain that followed the horrible attacks of Paris. No doubt, we are facing a threat that requires all our attention, but also firmness. However, it is essential that we do not give in to fears. We must continue to work. We must step up our efforts to make Europe stronger and more united, especially at a time when our principles and values are so openly threatened. This is what we are here for. Europe needs to work on itself. Europe needs a lot of change. Europe needs profound reform. Reforms are part of a never-ending process of adjustment, and they are needed to face the new economic, social, but I feel that also some cultural challenges. Today, we feel particularly focused on economic reforms. Indeed, this forum is part of the Martens Center's effort to be at the forefront of economic policy debates in Europe and to promote the ambitious reforms needed to ensure the continent's economic and technological status. As in the past, we will discuss some of the most significant economic developments in recent times, together with our distinguished speakers. And together with you all, we hope to better understand their implications. We also hope to develop fresh ideas that will help the European People's Party in its policy work for a prosperous Europe. Precisely, in order to encourage the active contributions of as many of you as possible, we have decided to structure the event around 5 roundtables. The first one will reflect on the importance of the digital economy in strengthening Europe's position as a global player. With the Economic Ideas Forum happening in parallel to the United Nations Climate Change Summit in Paris, we have decided to devote the second roundtable to the important challenge of balancing environmental sustainability and economic competitiveness in the EU energy and climate change policy. As you may know, at the Martens Center, we are strongly committed to supporting the efforts of Ukraine and the rest of the EU's eastern neighborhood to reform, to democratize, and to modernize. This is why the third roundtable will be discussed the importance of political reforms for economic prosperity in these countries. In our fourth roundtable, We have chosen to discuss a technology-driven change in our economic systems that promises to revolutionize many markets. I'm referring to the sharing economy, a great driver of growth and jobs, but according to some, also a new challenge for regulators. Finally, our fifth roundtable will be considered an issue often overlooked in economic policy making, the potential of science and technology to innovate Europe's business ecosystem. So, dear friends, with 5 roundtables and about 40 prominent speakers from the European and international institutions, politics and business, our program, I believe, is rich enough to allow an in-depth discussion of these important topics. Our attitude will be one of openness to the great opportunities that some of these economic transformations can offer, but also of readiness to responsibly take up the potential challenges that they raise. As I anticipated, the best way to achieve this difficult balance is promoting courageous reforms whenever they are needed to make our economic systems more resilient and more efficient. The European People's Party has not shied away from embracing an ambitious reformist agenda in many countries since the beginning of the economic crisis. Ireland, Spain, and Portugal come to mind as examples of countries where the EPP member parties presided over successful change and economic recovery. In Greece, it took, unfortunately, just a few months for a radical left government to jeopardize years of reforms undertaken by the previous EPP-led government. I hope that our Economic Ideas Forum will inspire even more courageous policies to the EPP and its member parties and contribute to our work for a more dynamic and more prosperous Europe. At the end, I want to give our special thanks to our sponsors. Money is important still. So we are very grateful to AT&T, CCIA, Disney, Google, Uber, and UPS for their trust, for their confidence, and for supporting us in making this forum possible. Thanks also to all of you for joining us, and let's get started with what promises to be a productive and inspiring day. Ladies and gentlemen, every substantial event, every major event has something like an opening address. And I am very pleased and very honored that in our case, the opening address will be made by a man who is still very young, but on the other side, very experienced, enjoying high respect not only in his home in Germany, but also in our countries and also at the European level. This man has been recently elected as deputy president of the Christian Social Union in Germany, and after European elections, this gentleman has been elected as a leader of the strongest fraction in the European Parliament of the EPP fraction. Ladies and gentlemen, let's greet and welcome Mr. Manfred Weber. Manfred, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. President, dear Mikuláš, ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, the first question of our president when he came to this place was which direction is the correct direction? That is the main question for all politics, you see. What is the direction we have to go? I welcome, first of all, the initiative and the ongoing work of our Wilfried Martens Center in contributing to create places to think about politics. We are in the parliament and a place where we have to decide at the end, where we have to vote on legislation, but we need places where we have time and resources and capacity to think about what are the long-term approaches for the European People's Party, and that's why I want to thank you and your team for all the initiatives, and I thank you on behalf of the EPP group for inviting a lot of EPP members from the group here to this debate during the whole day. Dear ladies and gentlemen, first of all, in your first invitation for this economic forum, you saw probably that the opening speech should be made by Joseph Daul. So I have to say very clearly, I'm not Joseph Daul. So that's the starting point, and I have to apologize him, and I want to send you the greetings from him. He cannot be present today, and I was a substitute today to be present, and I do this. Dear ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about economic things, then for sure the starting point, what the President also underlined was, the starting point is that we have to reflect in which time we are discussing economic future. And the time period, I think everybody is aware about this. When we entering this room, then there is a security check outside of this room. That shows that we have a different situation compared with the last month and years. So we are living in the European Union under the impression of terror, with the fear about an upcoming war, let me say, in Syria, with the fight against the Islamists there. And additionally, with the second subject, with the refugee crisis, which is affecting a lot of European member states very intensively. That is not directly linked to the economy, but it is indirectly a very important political challenge in front of us. And when we see these big challenges, these different kinds of crises, then, dear friends, I think we as EPP, we first have to reflect that the crisis of the past, of the last 5 years, we solved it as EPP. We did it because in the last 5 years we had the economic and the currency crisis in the European Union. And that was for sure as well a very important challenge for all of us. But we managed as EPP to give the good answers. We rescued 5 countries in the Eurozone with the program approach, with the Troika approach. And from these 5 countries we rescued with the ESM approach and so on, you're aware about this, 4 are now out of 5 are now out of the crisis. They are paying all the money back to the creditors on European level. They are doing the necessary structural reforms at home, and they are now the model for growth. Look, for example, to Ireland, one of these countries which is governed by our EPP friends. In Ireland, we are expecting for next year in Ireland 5% growth rate, an increase of the growth. And dear friends, these are Chinese figures when we have 5%. That's great. That's really great. And that is EPP. That is EPP. That's not only a national thing. That is EPP. Because when you compare it politically with Italy, with France, and you see where we have no engagement in reforms, in a reform agenda, then we have simply no growth. That is the reality all over Europe. And we are now in a time period where we have to protect the success stories in a lot of member states. And politically speaking, I have to say that I'm very upset, and I said this in the Parliament openly. I say this to our President of the European Parliament, Martin Schulz, as a socialist leader. I have to say clearly that what we see for the moment as an ongoing process in Portugal, that is a very, very risky approach from the socialists to work together with clear extremists who are against Europe, who are against NATO, who are against the euro. And together with them, the socialists try to build up now a minority government in Portugal, and that is not responsible from the socialists what they are doing there. That we have to clarify very clearly. That is what we have to see, that we as EPP, we managed in the last years the success story of the rescue, first of all, of our currency, and then of the growth approach. And I have to say this for our level, on the European level, in the same way. together with Jean-Claude Juncker, our EPP Commission President, with our vice presidents who are in charge for economic things, I think we described a very clear line. What we want to do on European level is with the new mandate we received from the voters during the election for the European Parliament. For example, 4 out of 7 vice presidents of the European Commission are linked to better regulation, to single market, 2 of them digital market, energy market, and so on. So there is a clear approach in, let me say, all the things which are linked to economic development and growth on European level. We, I think, did a great job in the last 1.5 years on European level, Commission and Parliament together, to really go the way, what we promised as EPP to the voters, to really go the way, big on big things and small on small things. Not more bureaucracy, but really answers to the challenges of our time. And one of the major, biggest success stories in the first year with the new Commission was the investment package, the EFSI, the so-called Juncker plan. It goes now operational, so it is now, the money is now ready. And this was one of the quickest, one of the fastest procedures I saw in the European Parliament in my mandate during the last 11 years. I'm elected as member of the European Parliament, and we really want to contribute to all the efforts of Jean-Claude Juncker to create growth on European level. Let me add 2 more ideas for the growth perspective, for the economic ideas perspective. One is, ladies and gentlemen, we have Paris now in mind, especially when we talk about the CO2 question, so the climate change thing, which is ongoing meeting now in Paris. And I mention this because Paris is clearly a signal for us as Europeans in our economy that we have to understand that if we only protect the old industries, if we only protect the old system, how Europe was successful, then we'll have no chance to win the future. Europe is, our economy is an economy which is driven by innovations, by new ideas. Only with new ideas we can protect our high standards we have in all the fields. That's linked to CO2, so to energy thing. If we are the model for the world, if Europe is the model for the world to change the energy system, to go away from CO2 emissions, to reduce them, then it's an innovation-driven economy. And that is our approach for the future. We have to develop the answers for the global level to answer the challenges, especially in the climate change field. I think our commissioners, which are all present today in the meetings, will for sure go more deeply in this discussion. But I can assure you that in the European Parliament, we do whatever we can do to support our friends, especially Commissioner Moedas, in the investment in innovation and in technologies, because that is the main issue. And a second remark to what I think on the concrete things, what is really important is for sure the digital field, which is also one of the panels today. You know that end of this year, this is the idea of the 2 presidents of Socialists, ALDE and EPP group, that we ask our colleagues in the LIBE committee to finalize till the end of the year the legislation on data protection, the data protection regulation and the data protection directive. Both documents are on the table. They are important on the one hand for the fight against terror, especially for the law enforcement agencies and so on. There it's important, but the most important thing is that we have to work on a common legal ground for a digital single market in the European Union. We have today a fragmentation. We have 28 different national data protection regimes, and that is stopping all the ideas which we have in Europe. We have the same ideas in Europe like the Americans have in Silicon Valley, for sure. We have a lot of young, well-educated and innovative people in the European Union. They have good ideas. But we have to organize for them a European single market for digital products and services. That is the idea behind the regulation, and we want to finalize this till the end of the year. I think we are on a good way, and we will show with this regulation that we will open this door in a digital world. with an European approach. We will not make copy and paste about the American approach, about big data. We will guarantee European standards. For example, the right to be deleted in the internet as a principle, to be forgotten in the internet, is one of the ideas of the principles. We want to assure an European approach and not a copy and paste approach of the American ideas. And there is our European Court of Justice as well, helpful because they stopped the safe harbor agreement. That's not welcomed by everybody, I know, but I think the signal is clear, because the signal is that everybody who wants to earn money in the European single market has to respect the European rules, how he can work with digital ideas. That is the idea behind. And there all the institutions, Court, Commission and Parliament, wants to work together to guarantee this for the European citizens. So these are only two specific remarks to the ongoing negotiations in the Parliament, and I am really thankful for all the possibilities to discuss today more deeply the problems which we have on the table. Let me conclude with coming back to our big challenges, political challenges which we have on the table, and I want to remind us as EPP political family that for the big question on terror and on refugees, because security is the basis for growth, is the base for growth, for economic success. So for these two challenges, I think EPP has really a clear line. And refugee thing, we are Christian Democrats, we are Christian-based political family. That means we have to be helpful, we have to help people from a civil war region. When poor countries like Jordan and Lebanon can do so much, then a rich continent like Europe must do although a lot. That's one of the red lines we have. And the other red line we have is that we have to ask for a realistic approach. We have to fight against smugglers. We have to fight for a state who is ready to defend borders as well. That's also needed. And to find the correct balance, a good balance, that is the job which we have to do today. And on the second thing, on the terror thing, dear friends, we have to face really a very huge challenge, and there will be no possibility of negotiations with ISIS. That is the reality. There will be no possibility to sit together with Islamists, with jihadists, to negotiate things. And when there are no negotiations possible, then there is only the solution to defend with weapons, if it is needed, our values. That is the reality we have to face. And I think Europe has now a big challenge and a big chance, because I welcome very much that François Hollande asked for the Article 42.7 to ask first of all about the European solidarity in the fight against ISIS, not to ask for NATO, to ask for European solidarity. That's a good approach, because that keeps the door open now to talk with Russia, to talk with the Arabic states, to talk with our American friends, that we form now a coalition together, that we understand that the most important enemy we have is not, first of all, Assad. He is a big problem, but the first and most important problem we have are the radicals in the Islamic State. That is what we have to answer. So thanks so much to the Wilfried Martens Center for all the initiatives, for all the work you are doing, and hopefully we can learn a lot, because we want to contribute and we want to learn a lot from such meetings like today. Thanks so much.
Dear audience, we'd like you to be very active today. This you can do by using the specially crafted Twitter hashtag, EIF15, and also through downloading the app, which you should have received the invitation for yesterday in your inbox at 3:30. Please do so because you'll be able to respond to polls, to surveys, send pictures, talk to each other, and so much more. Also, if you cannot make it through the entire day here today, we have a live streaming available on the homepage of the Martens Center website. Please check that out. Also, our cartoonist, Rafa Sanudo, sitting right here, will be sketching our discussions live as we go through the day. Also, our speakers, to ensure the liveliness of our debates here today, will have a limited time of 3 minutes max to make their points across. They will see these totems all around the room flare up as their time comes up. And finally, let's present our moderator for the day, the Executive Director of the Wilfried Martens Center, Tommy Hutanen.
Anna. And also from my behalf, welcome to Economic Ideas Forum and our first panel focusing on issue which was actually well presented by Chairman Weber, digital economy. Digital economy and its direction in Europe. Digital economy is a concept which resonates very strongly here in Brussels, but also in the member states. For surely because it presents kind of the change that not only European economy but global economy is going through. But it has also the political component, in the sense that in Europe still the economy is relatively stagnating, and so the concept of digital economy presents a possibility of hope. But there's a lot of controversy and questions related to the debate. First of all, is Europe really a leader, especially comparing to other continents, especially to United States? There's a many times accusation that in Europe we focus more on the challenges and the problems of the digital economy rather than embracing the opportunities. Then there's a very specific dynamics with the United States. Some accuse that the European Union is currently focusing a lot on how to tackle the competition from the United States, and rather than focusing on the issue of trade. For example, the question is said why there is no specific chapter on digital economy in the TTIP negotiation. And in overall, sometimes one feels feels in Europe that for everybody digital economy is a very positive thing, very much okay. But when you speak or you discuss of the specific changes, then you find a lot of resistance. So the direction of digital economy in Europe. And for that, we enter the debate. We have a very active 1 hour in front of us. And so I would like to give the floor for Kickoff, Madame Nathalie Kosciusko-Morizet, Vice President of Les Républicains. Madame, floor is yours.
Well, thank you for the Wilfried Martens Center for this invitation. Manfred Weber sketched a global picture with great talent, so for my sake, I was asked to focus on the question whether Europe was a leader or laggard when it comes to the digital economy. Well, the first reactions comes quickly, but it's a reaction out of pride. Of course, we are leader. We should be. We just can't be leaders. We concentrate in the European Union so many small and medium-sized companies. They can thrive within our global and dynamic single market. Of course, we are leaders. We benefit from 500 million consumer markets. We harbor in the European Union some of the most prestigious universities and talents. And I would have loved to pursue with this type of argument, bragging about our European digital successes. But unfortunately, when I look closely, I'm quickly driven back to reality. Indeed, while we as Europeans live amongst digital objects and digital networks on a daily basis, and you all have them there in your pockets, European Union cross-border services represent, well, only account for 4% of the worldwide online activity. 4% of worldwide online activity. So there is definitely margin for better. The digital single market proposal introduced by the European Commission in May aims at tackling the very fact that we are lagging behind, which is a reality. It was set as a priority, and I believe this should not be undermined. Because lagging behind when it comes to digital economy can seriously impair our capacity, not only in this sector, but our general capacity to renew our economic dynamics and to promote new sources of growth and employment. Digital is a trendy topic. Everybody talks about digital. But I often realize that people find it hard to perceive concretely how digital can affect our functioning and economic models as a whole. Because beyond digital lies a very wide spectrum of opportunities, which are not only strictly linked to technologies, but much wider than that. And that is specifically how and when I believe political impulses can make a difference, not specifically on technology, but on a wider picture. The EU needs to endorse that dimension, endorse the activation of digital as a tool to enhance global growth. And this is why I support the Commission's single digital market with its 3 pillars. I believe there are 2 priorities which the EU needs to tackle urgently. Ensure a wider access to the digital networks, because we are lagging behind, but far behind, for example, the US on that. But also make sure the government adapt their regulations in order to unleash what digitalization has to offer. And on the second aspect, I would just give a concrete example to make it clear. We are all aware that digital is a powerful level to change work organization, work time, office sociologies, and so on. But when applied to the workplace, digital can be a solution to reduce physical office-based work time, to reduce the need for individual transportation, to minimize the impact of work, only if our regulations are ready for that, adapted to that. If the regulation do not enable people to work at home, or to share offices, or to be paid on the basis of a day of work, then if we stick to an archaic hour of work regulation, for example, then digital will not generate gains. It will be a useless tool. That's what I want to make the point for this kickoff, that of course digital can change our world. Of course digitalization can enhance a new era of growth, but we have for that to change our mindset and regulation, and we had to do that on a wide range and not only with a technical set of mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. I think it was a very excellent introduction, laying out basically the basic questions of what we are tackling with. As next, I would turn to Fredrik Erixon, who is the director of the European Centre for International Political Economy. He's actually already an old friend of us in Economic Ideas Forum. Remember in Dublin discussion about TTIP. We continue on one part and a little bit the same debate. So, going to the following the issue of the relations to US. Fredrik, how do you see this, in overall, the whole dynamics of the European Union, especially Commission? are we really promoting trade here, or are we being too defensive vis-à-vis especially United States and their technologies and respective companies?
Thanks, Tommy, and thanks for the kind invitation to join you here for this Economic Ideas Forum. I think there are many different answers to the questions you raised. The first one, which I'd like sort of to pick up on, is what I would say is a false presentation of the economic gains from the digital economy when you sort of begin to compare yourself to the United States, or for that matter other parts of the world, and you try to measure up, how many unicorns do we have here in the tech sector, how many Googles, how many Amazons, how many Facebooks have been started or invented in Europe, and you compare that with the United States, and of course you come up with sort of a fairly somber conclusion, which is that in terms of generating new companies in the technology sector, at least in that particular bracket of the market, Europe hasn't been as successful as the United States. But the question is, does that really matter? Do we really sort of need to care about the national origin of where companies are started? Is it of economic importance for us or for other parts of the world where these companies tend to grow up? If you look at it from a strict sort of economic viewpoint and you try to understand the reality or the real aspect of why Europe generally, not all European countries, but Europe generally is a laggard in the ICT sector, it has almost nothing to do with how many companies, how many tech startups that are being created here, but it has to do about the capacity of our economies to adopt new technologies, to rapidly diffuse them out to the economy, and basically force companies, labor, capitalist governments to change, because that's really sort of what innovation and what productivity growth is about to what extent are we forced to change our behavior, to work smarter, to invest smarter than we did before. And it's here where we have the problem in Europe. It's exactly what you said, Nathalie, about sort of not just looking at the tech-specific regulations that exist in Europe. There are lots of things we can do, I agree. I mean, I think sort of the digital single market is a no-brainer. It should have been done 20 years ago. It's almost sort of embarrassing that we, 2015, are sitting here talking about sort of the reforms that they are proposing in the digital single market, because this is sort of should have been done a long time ago. But a bigger problem and a much bigger challenge for European countries and for the EU at large is the extent to which we can reform regulatory structures, labor market regulations, tax systems in order for our economies to more quickly adopt new technologies and sort of make new technologies work for our economic growth. So when you look at, you can take almost any economic indicator you want, and when you compare the European Union or Europe at large with the United States, with South Korea, with Japan, or other very tech-advanced economies, where we are a laggard is in our capacity to foster and diffuse new software, new platforms, new technologies into the wide economy. That's our problem. Our problem is not that we are a laggard in global trade or that we are a laggard in generating new ideas from our university, from our companies. The problem is exactly an economy-wide regulatory type of issue. And here, just to finish my 3 minutes introduction here, what we should look at is not trade figures on sort of processing data or data services and look sort of what's Europe's world share of global trade in these sectors. That's the wrong type of question or the wrong type of focus. What we should look at is the value added generated in services closely associated with data, software, and innovative technologies, and why Europe isn't as successful as many other countries in the world in driving that value generation in those services. Because data itself, you can sort of send data across borders, and that was all companies are doing. But the economic question is, to what extent can you build a services industry, a services sector, especially very advanced services, management services, R&D services, educational services, that ensure that your economy is going to generate productivity growth, jobs, economic growth, and at the end, more prosperity for the European population.
Thank you, Fredrik. I think it was very, interesting point, which many might find provocative. So basically, you are saying, how I understood, you're saying that it really doesn't matter who makes the technology, it's implementation and use of it, what really is the driver. Next, I would turn to Adina-Ioana Vălean. She's a vice president of the European Parliament and chair of the working group on ICT innovation strategy. Madam Vălean, innovation, indeed, in this context of digital economy is term you hear very often, not in this context and many other contexts. But sometimes it doesn't turn tangible, not for citizens, nor for, actually in many cases, for politicians. So in short, like 3 points for Europe agenda on innovation. What would be the concrete 3 actions or 3 areas where European Union member states should push concerning innovation?
Well, as you point out, we discuss a lot about fostering innovation, but there is no recipe, to be honest, in it. If it would have been, then we would have done it already. Of course, we are trying to keep the debate open and try to bring ideas around what politicians or what governments should do to encourage innovation. There are a couple of things we need to say. First of all, there is a model of over-regulating in Europe, which creates also red tape, bureaucracy, and I think if we compare ourselves with other areas in the world who have followed a pattern of lesser regulation, I would say we can see here a difference. But this is our model, and hopefully with a new commission scrapping regulation, let's hope that we will remain only with a useful part of it. Second, it's a problem of mentality, culture, and education. Because, for example, entrepreneurship is not a part of our school's curricula. We do not encourage this kind of mindset from early ages in school. We don't have, tech accelerators, but only a few, stuff like this, which also can differentiate us from other parts of the world where these things are better encouraged. But not only this, the third idea would be that even if we have innovation and startups, we have a problem of meeting innovation ideas with money in Europe, because there is little capital for businesses at early stages. We do find venture capital for businesses developed at later stages, but it's very few for the beginning. And this is, I would say, the third problem which would deter our innovation. And I will close by something I will ask you all as an idea to think about. Someone, not a European, told me recently that we are very good at inventing things, but we are not that good at innovating. And I don't know if you share this view or what we should do to improve this capacity. I'm sure we have.
Thank you. Thank you. In the EPP, I remember always the catchword was to say that the innovation is more for science, invention is more for science, and innovation is for the companies. So we go back to the question of the SMEs and those conditions. Our now turn to Jens Redmer, who is from Google, Germany, because Google in origin is from the United States, but currently is also a European company, head of product policy. So a lot of this digital economy discussion in comparative terms is about United States, the land of unicorns, as mentioned by Fredrik. So in brief, in your analysis, seeing both the US side and the European side, what are the basic elements and the differences in the framework for growing company as big as small, US comparing to Europe?
So if you compare the US and Europe, there's some obvious differences, right? So in the US we have a very large market of 300 million or so end consumers speaking one language. Mm-hmm. In Europe, it's a much more diverse scenario, and that brings opportunities, but it also brings challenges. So if you look at small and medium-sized businesses or startups, as we already discussed, there's a lot of challenge for a startup in creating and operating a company in Europe. If you have a great idea and the thresholds for generating companies, for creating companies have dramatically reduced over time. So we could have an idea in this forum today and we can set up a company and we can offer our web services by the end of today. And we have our first glass of wine tonight and our website is running, we have an e-commerce shop running, we have advertising, we have a company. That's possible today in Europe. But it could get challenging if our model was successful and we want to export the same model, because again, the thresholds are very low. We could export the same company that we today founded in Belgium. We could export the idea to Germany, to Italy, to France. Technically, that's totally possible and very easy, very simple. But are there legal challenges? You know, it could be a data protection question. It could be a tax question. There's lots of questions. So it's much more difficult for a startup in Europe to create, found, and operate and grow companies than it is in the US. So that's a problem, which is why it's actually sounds promising that the digital single market is now being tackled. So hopefully that all becomes a lot more easy for startups and for companies. And what we've seen with talks with many companies, with many of our customers, and also with many academic institutions, is that a lot of growth will come not only from the big companies, but from smaller companies. And the challenge that we see with many of these small companies is that they all see that something is happening. You know, digital is not a trend anymore; it's reality. It's nothing that will happen to my company in a few years. It's happening today. And 20 years ago, IBM advertised a TV spot, and you would see two businessmen reading the newspaper, and the one businessman would read to the other, and well, here's an article on the internet. Our company should go on the internet, and the other said, well, that's interesting. Let's go on the internet. Why should we go there? The article doesn't say. So that was 20 years ago, and now we all know that the internet is a dramatic and impressive economic force for many companies. And the challenge of those companies that see the opportunities, that see that something is happening, but they lack the skills. Right? So they look back into their company and say, what do I do? How do I tackle this question? This is why many companies, many institutions, including Google, have created projects and programs in order to help these growing economic forces in the small and medium-sized business. So I think in general, there's a lot of opportunity, and there's a lot of fish to fish in this big tank, and it doesn't need to be the very large companies that generate the value for an economy.
Thanks, Jens. I think you made a very good point on the fact that the digital economy is a buzz, causes interest, but the SMEs doesn't, in many cases, don't seem to know how to tap into it. That seems to be one of the challenges we are tackling. Now, before going to last debater, I would already, as said by Anna in the beginning, this is an interactive session, and so I'm already taking questions from the audience, of course, from the panelists, if you want to comment what has been discussed. So hands up, and so I can get you in the list. But I would turn now to James Waterworth, Vice President of Government Affairs at the Computer and Communication Industry Association, CCIA. James is also an old friend of the Economic Ideas Forum, so nice to see you here again. Couple of previous panelists already mentioned the issue of regulation, and so I know that you have been also been commenting that. So in your view, James, where are we going now? What is, of course we know that the regulatory structures, they are old-fashioned, lagging behind, but is the direction we are going, is it the right one, something which is promoting really digital economy, or are we making some missteps on the way? James, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Tommy. Good morning, everybody. So the answer to your question is, it depends. And there are mixed signals, and that's what democracy is about. It's about a big discussion about which is the right direction.
But are you
of
happy
course.
about that?
Well, it's not. I think I'm happy we live in a democracy. Yes, I am. But
The direction.
so the direction. So I mean, as Fredrik said before, it's an absolute no-brainer that we need to make the digital single market function for the perspective of our innovators as well as external innovators. And I'm actually much more optimistic than Fredrik also on the domestic scene in terms of innovators. There's any number of statistics about how well we're doing that the financial markets produce, and I think we should be quite optimistic there. The question is, will we mess that up? So we're actually doing pretty well on the technological innovation and business innovation. Will we mess that up by the regulatory regime? And the digital single market strategy is a very good one. It identifies a number of things, but it does also contain elements which are potentially re-regulatory, which will introduce new hurdles, whether between countries or for private investors. And remembering that those hurdles will always be much bigger hurdle for small companies than they will be for a big one like Google that has many lawyers, for example. So we should be always asking ourselves the question, if the small guy can deal with it, then it's good. If the small guy can't deal with it, then it's clearly not good and we have some concerns. But let me give you a couple of practical examples which show good things we're doing and things which can be still improved. Let me take one which European institutions have worked on the last few years, which is payment services. We have a very good regime for innovative payment services in Europe. We allow countries to set up in a country of origin. They operate under a passport whereby they go to third countries around the European Union. And, partly as a result of that, we have a significant number of very successful payment services innovators in Europe, certainly as many as in other regions of the world. That's a very positive story. But let's take briefly a couple of comments on what is one of the most horizontally important technology and non-technology issues, which is data, which is, of course, something which is not part of the new strategy, but which has been going on for the last 5 years and more. I think we've seen comments from various people in the EPP family recently, from Axel Voss, who's working on the data protection file in the Parliament, also from Angela Merkel, making clear that our ambition has to be very big here. This directive has to be good enough, this regulation has to be good enough, both for high standards of data protection, but also to allow the big data revolution, industrial uses of data to thrive. And I'm not sure we're there yet. And if we mess that one up, that's going to haunt us for quite a long time. The final practical example I'm going to give, and this is not a legislative file, relates to transferring data overseas. We need to be extremely attentive now that we don't fall into the trap of thinking that we can simply store and use data in the European Union and that's going to be okay. It's not going to be okay. And it's primarily not going to be okay for all of Europe's industrial companies who are going to be offering services all over the world and who want 24/7 support from help desks which are all over the world. So there's some practical examples of things we're doing really well and things which we're not definitely doing really well and we need to be careful about.
Thank you, James. Okay, now I turn to audience. Who will do the icebreaker? Here. Okay, all right, so there. So we take sir in the upper level first. There's a mic. Can you lift your hand? Just very, shortly. First sir up, and then you sir.
Thank you, Tilman.
State your name and then your background very shortly.
Thank you, Tilman Kupfer from British Telecom. Because the session is also about trade, I just want to ask to the speakers: do you think that the new strategy by Commissioner Malmström, which also has a little chapter on digital trade, has the right focus? Elements covered.
All right, answer there.
Stasinopoulos, formerly with the European Commission. I have two brief comments and questions to make in dealing with the question what the Europe can do to unlock the potential. I think the Vice President of the European Parliament mentioned the issue of education. What kind of changes or adaptations in our systems. We know quite well that the new technology requires people with creativity and cognitive and social skills. So I'm wondering, I think the question about the contribution of education becomes a little tougher given that important dimension. So that's one question for the panel. And the second one is the role of government, actually. Up to now, we have been thinking states or the community providing only the grand vision, actually, the orientation. I think on that area, we have to learn a lot from the United States, and I want the opinion of the panel. The US government or administration has been very smart, very savvy in picking winners in the technology field. I would like to mention GPS and many other new technologies which have been influenced, encouraged directly or indirectly by the government. So my second question is, what's the role of the government, of the our own states in encouraging technology?
All right, we take a third and then we go back to panel. Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. I'm Ivan. I'm coming from students of EPP, European Democrat students. My question is, European students got idea in Europe and then they go to United States and put it in work and develop it, and then they create companies, etc. My question is why, and the question is not directed to create an European national companies, etc., what you were just talking about, but more in a way that how can we create a European environment that is more oriented toward market innovations, ideas, acceptance, etc.
All right. I would turn now. I would divide the questions. First, the question concerning education. I would turn to Madame Vălean, because actually, if I understood correctly, you have specifically made that point as that in fact the education and the mentality related to the development of digital economy are as important or almost as important as the whole.
Although it's difficult to, first of all, we have to say there are differences between member states. It's not the same thing in every country. The way they tackle the education for entrepreneurship. So there are differences, and maybe more exchange of good practices would be a good idea. We cannot regulate on education legislation from Brussels in every country. It's a national prerogative. That's why some countries are doing better and some are doing worse. It's also the kind of mentality, because a part of including in our schools, in curricula, entrepreneurship and these skills. Apart from that, the mentality of risk-taking, we are not encouraging in young people in Europe, or most of the countries, the idea of taking risks, because if you don't take risks, you do not go there and innovate. And also the culture of failure. We have to teach children that to fail is okay as long as you keep going. So this difference of mentality is something which comes from our culture and needs to be changed with and as I said, there are differences in Europe. Also to tackle briefly the idea, the thing with data flows and the trade strategy of Commissioner Malmström, I think it's very important to develop answers to the needs existing right now with data flows, with safe harbor, and I think the commissioner has to come quickly with an answer to all these issues. And I join what was said, that we cannot now build walls around a data economy in Europe. We have to keep it open, and we cannot put walls to data economy. It's ridiculous, this idea. And we have to benefit and have all the exchanges with parts of the world. The idea would be just to encourage our companies to scale up and go and compete globally. We can't keep them at home. So we have to make the best of everything, keep it open, and try to be more competitive out there in the world. But we cannot stop this.
I'd like to add to that, if I may, because
Yeah.
I think that the two topics of education and culture, is this mic working?
Yes, yes.
The two topics of education and culture are really important. And if you go around on a weekend day in summer in the US, you would see, and you go into a rural area, into suburban area, you will see all these neighbor kids selling lemonades. It's not a myth, it actually happens. So these 6- and 7-year-olds are getting their first experience what it means to fail. Because typically one mom cooks all the lemonade, and then she gives it to the 3 best friends, and they all set up their booth, their small lemonade stand. And for some reason, my neighbor friend sells better than I do, but he sells the same product. But he has some way of selling it better or cheaper or in a more effective way. So at an early age, kids learn what it means to fail. And that kind of culture of failing, and which is where I really like what you said, this culture of failing, of also somehow celebrating failure. You can learn from it if you really take the benefits from failing. That is deeply rooted into the American culture. And that also leads to the fact that if you ask a very successful entrepreneur, he or she will probably tell you, well, I had to fail 3 companies before I had the 4th idea, which was successful. And in Europe, in many countries, including my own, Germany, people have the stigma of failure once they fail for the first time. And if you stop there, you're restricted by failure. You're not embracing and celebrating failure. And I think that's really important to embed that in the education system as well. And when you talk about innovation, it's also very important to understand that innovation doesn't necessarily mean products. It doesn't mean creating a new technology, owning a patent for something. It can also mean changing your business structure, changing the culture in the company, changing business processes. And one of my favorite examples is the change of a business model for a gas station. If you look at a gas station 50 years ago, it only sold fuel, and maybe you could change your spark plugs or clean your spark plugs. That was it. And the only margin, the profit for this business came from selling petrol. If you look at a business model for a gas station today, it's a supermarket. And the margins are now coming from, thank you very much, margins for a gas station. Is this working? Okay. Margins for a gas station are now coming from the supermarket model. So as an owner of a gas station, you could see this as a dramatic change and a threat to your traditional model of selling petrol. But you could also see it as an opportunity because all of a sudden you now have business models that are more profitable and have higher margins. The same has happened. This may sound like a sweet example, which is kind of taken out of context, but other business areas have adapted this model. The publishing industry has been dramatically challenged by the digital industry. Take one of the companies that I started my career as Springer Publishers. They suffered heavily from the digital world in the beginning. They now have created more digital assets than they have lost on their traditional market in print journalism. So they have successfully created their own supermarket model for their business. Some of their digital assets are now creating more revenue, more profit than the traditional model, and they have really succeeded well on this. And I could go on. There's many examples of this, but the yellow light is flashing.
All right. Thanks, Jens. Excellent examples. Now, concerning the question of role of the government, I would turn to Madame Kosciusko-Morizet on what role should. That was the question. What role should government really have on the whole dynamics of developing digital economy? How do you see it in the framework?
I would say we have 3 roles. The first one is definitely making sure that everybody has a chance to have access to the technology. That's not the main thing. That's not the goal of the whole policy, but this is part, and this is the basis of it, including in the lost regions that would not be in the scope of the companies developing infrastructures if nobody cares for that. The second goal for government, I think, is about unleashing all regulation, any traditional patterns and laws and that prevent us from taking advantage of the opportunities. That's the example I gave about working conditions. If we don't do anything to change our working regulation, there is no chance we can benefit from the opportunities behind digitalization of work, like working at home, organizing one's a different manner, developing new framework for new way of working and so on. And the third goal is about protecting people, making sure that the development of digitalization goes the right way. That's a little of what you say about democracy at the beginning. Well, technology is not in itself good or bad. There is no moral dimension of technology. It can be good or it can be bad. If you take the fire, you can use the fire to burn books or people, or you can use the fire to light the room. Well, it's the same for the internet and digitalization as a whole. So government have to make sure that privacy, for example, is protected, and this includes some new regulation. The fewest we have, the best we do, but we need some of them. To finish, I would say we also should think about the reasons that make some of our people, our younger and most talented people, flee away to create their companies or develop their companies elsewhere. Going to the States and asking young people why they are here is so interesting, because the reasons are not necessarily what we think there would be. Of course, there's money. I needed money to develop my company, but there's also the size of the market. Because we have a 500 million people market, but it's not real, because it's not a real single market. So a lot of them have gone out because of the market, and some also just because of the atmosphere, because they fear something's happening there that is not happening at home, and maybe that's the toughest to change, but the most important.
Thank you, Madam. Next, I would turn to Fredrik. But before that, I have kind of question to the audience. Do we agree what Fredrik said beforehand, like the basic? Because I think it's a strong argument, basically saying that this whole fuss about being so defensive with the companies of the lands of the unicorn, United States, it's basically nonsense. What we should do is really focus on trade, on the adapting the technologies, because that's quite not in all circles everybody agrees. So I will take comments for that. But I have no, because there's still the question of the direction of the trade. I will get back to you. But the question of the trade and for Fredrik, for you, and also maybe in the beginning it was mentioned the issue of having a digital chapter in the TTIP. Does it make any sense? Does it play a role, or So on those questions. Question on trade direction, where we're going, and then the TTIP chapter.
Yeah, indeed. Let me just first say, first a personal example about the educational system, the presumption of the use of technology. When my oldest boy started school last year, I had a conversation with the teacher and asked him, so what do you do with digital technologies in schools now? I mean, when are they going to start to use it? And the head teacher, he looked at me and almost as if he was trying to reassure me and said, no, don't worry. We're not going to start to use any computers or any digital technology until they turn 10 years old. And I was trying to say, no, you misunderstand me. I want them to be exposed to it. Yeah. So it's just a funny cultural clash in the sense of what's the presumption in the educational system about exposure to new technologies and how we think about that. I have a fairly optimistic view about entrepreneurship in Europe. I think there has been huge changes over the past 20 years, and I think you can see that especially among the younger generation, that they are far more open to starting their own businesses. At the same time, what we're seeing in America is that the churning rate of new companies are going down. that sort of the culture of entrepreneurship isn't as visible as it was before, and that the culture of failure is quickly diminishing from especially younger generation in America. You don't see that sort of land of the brave culture anymore. So I think sort of America and Europe are, even if we come from different points of view, we are converging towards each other in the sense that Europe is more open to entrepreneurship, can do a lot more, and America is going in the other direction. On the question of trade, look, the trade strategy is, I mean, here's my point. If it was up to the European Commission to decide or determine what type of trade agreements with whom we're going to negotiate around the world, Europe would have been much, much better off than we are. The problem right now is that trade isn't so much about the policies or the instruments that trade negotiators have to negotiate with other countries in the world. The problems with trade has to do with our regulation, with a lot of issues that trade negotiators or trade strategies simply cannot do anything about. It's about our capacity to start reforming at home, to be an open economy. If we are that, we're going to find it's far more easy also to negotiate good trade agreements with other parts of the world. So the trade strategy itself is, I think it's broadly very good. The problems I have with Europe's general economic strategy for how it's going to integrate with the rest of the world is that we are far too slow in making changes to domestic regulatory structures that allow us to be more competitive, more forward-oriented, more offensive in our interest, what we want to do with other parts of the world. I think TTIP is a good example where sort of we have huge opportunities to begin doing or undoing a lot of obstacles that exist in reality for companies in the world of trade. Most of these issues are not bread and butter trade policy issues. They're about completely different type of things, which is why it really sort of it doesn't make any big sense to have sort of one particular chapter in TTIP or any other trade agreement where you're trying to deal with digital issues. They have to come into all different chapters because they end up and manifest themselves in different ways in the way we trade. One final point, however, which is on the safe harbor. If we cannot find an acceptable alternative to the safe harbor, which will allow the free flow of data across borders between America and Europe of roughly the kind we have right now, I don't think there's going to be a TTIP. That's the significance of that issue. If you take away that, boom, there goes TTIP.
All right. With that happy note. Listen, we have 30 minutes left, so let's now keep it short. The comments, we have Peter Jungen there, and the microphone here. And then we have Dirk, and let's see how we go.
Thank you.
Time.
Thank you, Tommy. I'm an angel investor and a co-founder and honorary president of IBAN, the European Business Angel Network. I'm pleased about part of the debate. I'm asking my questions on some of the other issues in the debate, where they're really covered in reality. The remarks by the Romanian MEP about entrepreneurial spirit in Europe and the failure culture, I think that is widely shared, is so very important. There may be a change, but if you look on the numbers, I'm asking myself on the panel, do you believe that the gap between Europe and the US in terms of technology, digitalization is shrinking or widening? And I have an opinion, I won't say that, but I give you just a few numbers. If you look on venture capital investment, per capita on the population, we have about, in the US, $200 per capita of the population. Israel, about 250 per capita. India is about 10 to 12. China on the same level per capita. EU between 8 and 10. And Eurozone about 5 to 6 per capita. Now, if you look on the numbers of the population, you could see that obviously the innovation pace in India and China may be even faster than in Europe. So is it shrinking or is the gap widening? My observation is there is about 28 times as much angel investing in the US than in the EU. Last year's numbers and this year numbers shows that it will be even widening the gap. So we do more investments in the US than in Israel and then in Europe. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Dirk? There. Yep.
Right, thank you, Tommy. My name is Dirk Hudig from FIPRA in Brussels. I was just wanting to go back to some of the more practical questions. I mean, this is an ideas forum, and I'd like to launch an idea, which is that one of the impediments to the internal market really functioning well is that entrepreneurs have to deal with 28 plus tax regimes. And a lot of digital businesses, lots of small transactions where the effort to collect the tax is probably bigger than the value of the tax being collected. So every music transaction that you have to get the VAT back from that is a huge impediment and also a practical problem for entrepreneurs to actually run their business. And certainly if you're a small company, the complexity of that means that the scale of the internal market really isn't relevant. So what do you do about that? Well, my suggestion is that to help the internal market function better and to remove this impediment for entrepreneurs is let's have a de minimis tax return. And that might be €3, because many of these transactions are small. So you've had a transaction which is, I don't know, 21%, then, but anything that's below the €3 should be excluded from an administrative burden for the individuals and also for the state, because sometimes the effort to collect that money costs the state as much as the money being collected. So there's an idea to make the thing work better.
Thank you, Dirk. So it's a concrete. Okay, we are going to take very short, and then we are going to turn to panel to give a final.
My name is András
Very
László,
short, please.
Hungarian name, and I'm representing my own company, globalvisionsharing.net. I very carefully listened to all the distinguished speakers, and I heard a lot of word and fine ideas. I heard education, governance, best practices, but I didn't hear the word ethics. So my very question to all the panelists is, isn't it time that also we introduce an ethical standard in the digital market so that we have no scandals anymore? We have a lot of scandals in the automotive industry, in the pharmaceutical, in the meat industry. The list is endless. So unless we introduce something to abide by on an ethical way, there will be a lot of problems, and it will be the Far West still, isn't it?
So the question about ethics. Good, it has been very interesting discussion, but now we are going to do towards end of it. As Dirk very well pointed out, this is an economic ideas forum. So what I would ask from the debaters is to give them a kind of a short closing remark, but focusing on the one single, idea which you want to promote in this discussion. So I give you a pause so you can think, and now James will start. All right.
You set up perfectly the idea that I wanted to bring out, which is just a practical one, which is on exactly tax. Two types of areas where the European Union is ideally suited to take effective action. Number one, small companies trading online and VAT. If you are currently a seller from Spain and you're selling via a big platform and the product might go to Italy and it goes via a warehouse in Germany, you need to register for VAT in all of those countries. It's an absolute administrative nightmare, discouraging a huge number of people. Second administrative nightmare, which the EU could deal with, tax data of individuals and companies. We have very different rules on whether you're allowed to move tax data out of the country. In Germany, for example, if you want to move tax data out of Germany, you need the explicit consent of the tax authorities to store it in the cloud in France or in any other country in the world. And that is clearly an impediment to the kinds of services that you can use, whether you're an individual or whether you're a corporation. So there's two very practical ideas.
Thank you. Jens?
So
one clear idea.
My comment is on the shrinking versus widening gap question from the gentleman in the VC business. So I think the VC business and creating new companies is one side of the equation. The other side of the equation is how do you help existing businesses to grow and grasp the opportunities that digital brings? And as I mentioned in the beginning, Google and another group of companies and partners have created some initiatives that help these small and medium-sized businesses to understand what does it mean, even if current regulations are strict and are complicated. What does it mean to export my service or my product into other countries? How do I get my staff skilled up with digital skills? So these kinds of programs that we do online and offline and training centers together with partners actually help to train. Our big goal is to train about 1 million people by the end of 2016, and we're very well on that way. About 700,000 have been trained so far. So I think training existing businesses and making them grow and helping them to grow in the digital space is really helping as well, in addition to what's necessary in the VC space. And I absolutely share your concern that we need to do something about making it more attractive for VC companies and for startups to leverage the opportunities in the digital space.
Thank you, Jens. Fredrik, your most important idea.
Well, firstly, introduce the do no harm principle that every legislator around Europe needs to follow. There are lots of positive things we can do, but we have to look at the reality that a lot of the regulation that comes out from the European Parliament or from the EU institutions and from different sort of governments, they constrain our ability to prosper on the back of new technologies and new services that you can create. On the positive agenda, infrastructure, digital infrastructures around Europe, tax systems, allowing people to fund companies with their own income rather than have to tax labor income before they're going to invest money in their own companies. Allowing more generous rules generally for tax when it comes to investing in new companies, in order to get away from the situation which we have in Europe right now, where you either get dependent on a bank to fund you, or you have to go to a very underdeveloped securities market or to an underdeveloped market for angel funding, which basically means that if you look around the world to Israel, to South Korea, to United States, it's far more easier to develop your things there. So tax reform.
Thank you, Fredrik. Madam Vălean.
I think we have a great opportunity now when the Commission decided to put forward this package of digital single market, which is, of course, is not a brainer, as was said, but is needed. And we have the great opportunity to solve, as you said, to make the TVA, VAT reform, to make the copyright, to try to make common rules so that companies would be able to scale up faster. And this would be the idea. And secondly, this will encourage or it will make the investment environment in Europe more attractive for money to come. Because I think there is a gap, but this gap is because we are so fragmented in rules and we are not encouraging investment at the European level the way it should be. We might even have to keep some of the European money at home, because some of the money going and investing in the US are European money, and we should also think about that. How can we keep our capitals at home, becoming more attractive and having a bigger market, bigger than 28 separate ones, just one bigger.
Thank you. And Madam Kosciusko-Morizet, your key idea.
Well, my proposition would be to use the digital sector as a field for experimentation. There are some reforms that are very difficult to develop on a global basis, but we can demonstrate in the field of digital economies it works. And this will be a strong incentive to widen them. This would be right for tax convergence. This could be also the case for job labor regulation. Assume that in the digital sector the rules are different, maybe more liberal, and then show there that it works. And last but not least, I would say this is not the focus of the forum to speak about security, but one word, as I said, I don't think there are any moral dimension with technology. It's not good or bad. This is whatever we do, which means this is also our role to prevent it from turning bad. And this is certainly very actual today.
Thank you very much. I think it has been, time is up. We have 1 minute left. I think it has been very good discussion. Apart from the, 5 outstanding key ideas which has been underlined in this last round, I think it's evident as by through various debaters that, well, they're saying that you need more European cooperation. That's kind of the classic cliche word in all the conclusions, but I think one of the debaters made a good point on that if in this case it's really make it or break it. We need if we don't have that efficient European model, basically we can then question if we in reality even have digital economy in Europe in a wider sense. Secondly, about I go back to the point which Fredrik made. I think that we have to maybe do some rethinking on our approach to whole question, especially maybe the US technology and how they advancement, and see again that rather as an opportunity than some kind of massive challenge. Me also as a moderator have been comparing us to United States, but it's not we should not see those developments as some kind of challenge or problem, but indeed part of the same West and their success, and together their success is our success, and together we should be very serious about advancing trade. And I think what was mentioned was the issue of the mentality and culture. I think if you put it very simply, you sometimes have a feeling that in Europe, among politicians, but also among the public, you have the feeling that the thinking is that digital economy means that the same companies and same people are doing exactly the same things than before, but a little bit faster because of the internet. But the reality is that you have new actors, you will have new actors, new companies, new business models. Things will change, and things will change. So the question is for us is either we embrace it or either we lose it. With this, I would thank you for your attention to our discussion. And while waiting the second panel to start, I would like to invite you to the coffee break. Thank you very much.